Welcome to Speak Peak English. Today, we'll practice English with the story, A Power Outage Evening. This lesson will introduce vocabulary related to unexpected situations, home essentials, and problem solving. It's a great way to improve your listening and speaking skills while learning useful words for everyday challenges. Let's get started. Listen carefully. A Power Outage Evening. Mia had just finished cooking dinner when, suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. The entire apartment fell into darkness. She sighed and reached for her phone to check if it was a citywide power outage or just her building. The screen showed no updates, but a quick glance out the window revealed the entire neighborhood was dark. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. "Mia, do you have power?" she asked, holding a small lantern. "No, it just went out a minute ago," Mia replied. "Do you know what happened?" "I think it's the whole block," Mrs. Jenkins said. "I heard some workers outside earlier. Maybe they were fixing something and caused this." Mia turned on her phone's flashlight and walked to the window. The streetlights were off, and she saw people stepping out of their apartments with flashlights and candles. Some children were excitedly playing with glow sticks, treating the blackout like an adventure. "I have a few candles and a flashlight," Mia said. "Do you need anything?" "I have a lantern, but I was about to make tea when the power went out," Mrs. Jenkins said. Mia smiled. "Well, my stove is gas, so I can still boil water. Let me make some for you." As Mia heated the water, she found an extra candle and placed it on the table. The warm glow flickered against the walls, making the room feel cozy. She handed Mrs. Jenkins a steaming mug of tea, and they sat by the window, sipping slowly. The night was strangely peaceful without the usual hum of electronics. No buzzing fridge, no television sounds, just the occasional murmur of neighbors chatting outside and the soft rustling of tree branches in the wind. "This reminds me of when I was a kid," Mrs. Jenkins said. "We used to play board games and tell stories whenever the power went out." Mia laughed. "I think I have a deck of cards somewhere. Want to play while we wait?" "That sounds like a great idea," Mrs. Jenkins said. Mia rummaged through a drawer and found a slightly worn deck of playing cards. They started with a simple game of rummy, exchanging stories about their favorite childhood pastimes in between turns. Halfway through their second game, the lights suddenly flickered back on. The refrigerator hummed back to life, and a neighbor cheered from down the hall. The power was restored. "Well, I guess that's the end of our blackout game night," Mia said, setting her cards down. Mrs. Jenkins smiled. "Maybe next time, we don't need a power outage to have tea and a game night." "I'd like that," Mia agreed. As she cleaned up the table, she realized the outage had turned into a rare, peaceful moment, one she wouldn't mind experiencing again. Power or no power. After listening to A Power Outage Evening, you probably noticed how unexpected situations can create meaningful moments and bring people together. What did you think about how Mia and Mrs. Jenkins turned a blackout into a cozy and enjoyable evening? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Now, let's explore some key vocabulary from the story to boost your English skills. It's time for word exploration. 1. Flicker, definition. To shine unsteadily or go on and off quickly. Example from the story. The lights flickered and went out. Example from real life. The candle flickered in the wind before going out. Second lantern. Definition. A portable light source, often powered by batteries or fuel. Example from the story. I have a lantern, but I was about to make tea when the power went out. Example from real life. We took a lantern with us when we went camping. 3. Hum. Definition. A low, continuous sound. Example from the story. The night was strangely peaceful, without the usual hum of electronics. Example from real life. The refrigerator makes a quiet hum when it's running. Fourth deck of cards. Definition: a complete set of playing cards. Example from the story: I think I have a deck of cards somewhere. Want to play while we wait? Example from real life: we brought a deck of cards to play during the long train ride. 5. Restore. Definition: to bring back something that was lost or stopped. Example from the story: the power was restored, but Mia realized she had actually enjoyed the quiet moment. Example from real life: the old painting was carefully restored by an art expert. Now, it's time for the final round. Let's practice listening and speaking with a repeat after me session. Ready? Let's go. A power outage evening. Mia had just finished cooking dinner when, suddenly, the lights flickered and went out. The entire apartment fell into darkness. She sighed and reached for her phone to check if it was a citywide power outage or just her building. The screen showed no updates, but a quick glance out the window revealed the entire neighborhood was dark. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Jenkins. "Mia, do you have power?" she asked, holding a small lantern. "No, it just went out a minute ago," Mia replied. "Do you know what happened?" "I think it's the whole block," Mrs. Jenkins said. "I heard some workers outside earlier. Maybe they were fixing something and caused this." Mia turned on her phone's flashlight and walked to the window. The streetlights were off, and she saw people stepping out of their apartments with flashlights and candles. Some children were excitedly playing with glow sticks, treating the blackout like an adventure. "I have a few candles and a flashlight," Mia said. "Do you need anything?" "I have a lantern, but I was about to make tea when the power went out," Mrs. Jenkins said. Mia smiled. "Well, my stove is gas, so I can still boil water. Let me make some for you." As Mia heated the water, she found an extra candle and placed it on the table. The warm glow flickered against the walls, making the room feel cozy. She handed Mrs. Jenkins a steaming mug of tea, and they sat by the window, sipping slowly. The night was strangely peaceful, without the usual hum of electronics. No buzzing fridge, no television sounds, just the occasional murmur of neighbors chatting outside and the soft rustling of tree branches in the wind. "This reminds me of when I was a kid," Mrs. Jenkins said. "We used to play board games and tell stories whenever the power went out." Mia laughed. I think I have a deck of cards somewhere. Want to play while we wait? That sounds like a great idea, Mrs. Jenkins said. Mia rummaged through a drawer and found a slightly worn deck of playing cards. They started with a simple game of rummy, exchanging stories about their favorite childhood pastimes in between turns. Halfway through their second game, the lights suddenly flickered back on. The refrigerator hummed back to life, and a neighbor cheered from down the hall. The power was restored. Well, I guess that's the end of our blackout game night, Mia said, setting her cards down. Mrs. Jenkins smiled. Maybe next time, we don't need a power outage to have tea and a game night. I'd like that, Mia agreed. As she cleaned up the table, she realized the outage had turned into a rare, peaceful moment, one she wouldn't mind experiencing again. Power or no power. That's it for today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed learning with the story, A Power Outage Evening. If you liked this session, don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Remember, practice makes progress, so keep building your English skills every day. Until next time, stay positive and keep learning.